Luna Ashworth thought her greatest challenge would be surviving Shadowmere Academy. She was wrong. After discovering her true nature as a balance keeper and watching the boy she loves be broken by liquid shadow essence, Luna faces an impossible choice. Help the mad headmaster Thorn open a portal that could destroy the world, or watch everyone she cares about suffer the same fate as her parents. But Luna has learned something important during her time at the academy. The most powerful magic isn't about individual strength, it's about connection. And she's about to prove that love really is stronger than entropy itself. The storm that had been building on the horizon all night finally broke just before dawn, and with it came something Luna hadn't expected. Hope in the form of a girl with shadow ravens and a message that would change everything. "Miss Ashworth." The voice made Luna look up to find a girl standing in her doorway. Sarah Nightwhisper, a third-year student with the ability to summon shadow ravens. Her dark eyes were filled with something that looked like sympathy mixed with fear. "I brought you something." Sarah stepped into the room and closed the door behind her, then pulled a small crystal from her pocket. The moment it touched the air, Luna could hear Kieran's voice, weak but unmistakably his. "Luna, if you're hearing this, it means Sarah managed to get the message crystal to you. I need you to listen carefully. Thorn isn't just planning to open a portal. He's planning to sacrifice you to stabilize it permanently. The ritual will kill you, and your death will create a permanent bridge between our world and the shadow dimension." Luna's blood turned to ice. "How do you know this?" The crystal continued to glow as Kieran's recorded voice went on. "I've been researching Balance Keepers since the day we met, trying to understand what you are, what we are together. The last Balance Keeper wasn't corrupted by conflicting energies. She was murdered during a ritual just like the one Thorn is planning. Her death created a temporary portal that lasted for 3 days before collapsing. But in those 3 days, shadow creatures poured through and devastated half the continent." Sarah sat down beside Luna, her expression grim. "There's more. Show her the book." The girl pulled an ancient leather-bound tome from her bag, its pages yellow with age and covered in symbols that seemed to writhe and shift when Luna looked at them directly. "This is from the restricted section of the library. It details the original Balance Keeper ritual, the one that went wrong 3 centuries ago." Luna opened the book with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the archaic text. What she read made her stomach turn. The ritual didn't just require a Balance Keeper's death. It required the willing sacrifice of someone they loved, someone whose life force could anchor their spirit to the mortal plane long enough to complete the portal opening. "He's going to make me choose," Luna whispered, the pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. "Between saving Kieran and saving the world." "Not if we stop him first," Sarah said, her voice fierce with determination. "There are others, Luna. Students who figured out what Thorn is really planning, who've lost friends and family to his experiments. We've been waiting for someone with the power to fight back." The crystal in Luna's hand pulsed with new light, and suddenly the room was filled with voices, dozens of them all speaking in unison. "We stand with you, Luna Ashworth. We offer our strength, our creatures, our lives if necessary. But we will not let Thorn turn our academy into a gateway for invasion." Luna looked around the room and saw them materializing from the shadows. Students she'd barely spoken to, upperclassmen who'd never acknowledged her existence, even a few professors who'd apparently been working against Thorn from within. Each of them had their creature companion at their side, and Luna could feel the combined weight of their magical power pressing against her consciousness like a tide. "This is insane," Luna said, but even as the words left her mouth, she could feel something changing inside her. The rage and despair that had been consuming her for the past day was transforming into something else. Determination, purpose, the kind of cold fury that could move mountains. "The ritual is tomorrow night," Sarah continued. "Thorn will bring you to the old summoning chamber beneath the academy, the one that was sealed after the last Balance Keeper incident. He'll have Kieran there as leverage, probably chained to the altar where the sacrifice is supposed to take place. And you want me to walk into an obvious trap?" "We want you to spring the trap," one of the professors said. Luna recognized him as Professor Blackwood, the man who'd identified her spirit wolf during her first summoning. "But not alone, and not as the victim Thorn expects. We want you to go in there as what you really are, a Balance Keeper with an army of the living and the dead at her command." Luna closed her eyes, feeling the weight of their expectations, their hope, their desperate need for someone to stand up to the madness that had infected their school. When she opened them again, Phantom was standing beside her, his form more solid than she'd ever seen it, his purple eyes blazing with otherworldly fire. "All right," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "Let's go save the world. But first, we're going to save Kieran. And then, we're going to make Thorn pay for every life he's destroyed in pursuit of his twisted vision." The next 72 hours passed in a blur of frantic preparation, desperate research, and the kind of magical experimentation that would have given the Academy's insurance company collective heart attacks. The Great Hall had been transformed into a command center, with maps of dimensional space spread across every available surface, and students working around the clock to modify the Academy's most powerful summoning circles. Luna stood at the center of it all, coordinating efforts with the kind of natural leadership that surprised everyone, including herself. The shy, frightened girl who had arrived at Shadowmere Academy just weeks ago was gone, replaced by someone who could look at an impossible task and immediately start breaking it down into manageable pieces. "Professor Blackwood," Luna called out, not looking up from the dimensional chart she was studying. "What's our status on the other academies?" "Already contacted," Sarah said, appearing at Luna's elbow with a communication crystal in her hand. "The Celestial Academy is sending 50 of their most powerful students. The Elemental Institute is contributing their entire senior class. Even the Necromantic College, which hasn't cooperated with anyone in 2 centuries, is sending their best death speakers. The power requirements are staggering," Professor Blackwood reported, looking up from a complex magical equation that covered an entire blackboard. "Creating a stable pocket dimension large enough to house the entire shadow creature population will require approximately 10,000 units of pure magical energy, sustained for at least 6 hours. "How much energy can we generate?" Luna asked. "With every student and professor working together? Maybe 7,000 units total. We need at least 3,000 more. What about the shadow creatures themselves?" Luna asked suddenly. "They have their own magical energy. What if we could convince them to contribute to their own rescue?" Professor Blackwood blinked. "That's actually brilliant. Shadow creatures exist across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. Their energy signatures are exponentially more complex than ours. A dozen of them working with us could provide the missing power we need. There's just one small problem," another student pointed out. "How do we communicate with beings from another dimension when we've sealed the portal between our worlds?" Luna was quiet for a moment, her consciousness reaching out to touch the edges of the dimensional barriers she had reinforced just days ago. The portal was sealed, yes, but not destroyed. And with her balance keeper abilities, she might be able to create a small, temporary opening, just enough for communication, not enough for invasion. "I can do it," she said finally. "But I'll need an anchor on this side, someone to pull me back if I get lost between dimensions." "Absolutely not," came a weak voice from the entrance to the hall. Luna turned to see Kieran being helped in by 2 students, his face pale and drawn, but his gray eyes blazing with determination. The shadow essence had stolen his magic and his voice, but apparently not his stubborn refusal to stay in bed when people he cared about were in danger. "Kieran," Luna breathed, rushing to his side. "You shouldn't be here. You need to rest." He shook his head, then pulled out a piece of paper and wrote quickly, "Not letting you face this alone. I'm your anchor, remember?" Luna stared at the note, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. The shadow essence had taken so much from him. His magic, his voice, his connection to Nyx. But it hadn't taken his courage or his determination to protect the people he loved. "Fine," she said, taking his hand in hers. "But we do this properly. Full protective circles, emergency extraction protocols, and at least 6 backup plans for when everything goes wrong." Kieran managed a weak smile and wrote, "When everything goes wrong? Not if?" "This is us we're talking about," Luna said dryly. "Something always goes wrong. The trick is making sure the wrongness works in our favor." 3 hours later, Luna found herself standing in the center of a modified summoning circle that looked like something designed by a mathematician with a serious caffeine addiction. Concentric rings of protective symbols surrounded her, each one calibrated to a different aspect of dimensional magic. Kieran stood just outside the circle, his hands pressed against a control crystal that would allow him to monitor her vital signs and magical energy levels. "Remember," Professor Blackwood called from his position at the monitoring station, "you're not trying to physically enter the shadow realm. You're creating a communication bridge, a temporary overlap between dimensions. Stay focused on your anchor point, Kieran's magical signature, and don't let yourself get pulled too deep into their reality. Luna nodded, then closed her eyes and reached out with her consciousness. The dimensional barriers felt like walls of crystallized starlight, beautiful and terrible and absolutely not meant to be breached by mortal minds. But Luna was no longer entirely mortal, was she? The spirits of the dead had left their mark on her, and her bond with Kieran had transformed her into something new. She pressed against the barriers, feeling them bend and flex under her will. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, she was through. The shadow realm was nothing like what she had expected. Instead of darkness and horror, she found herself in a place of impossible beauty. Crystalline spires that sang with harmonic frequencies, gardens of living light that grew in patterns too complex for human comprehension, and everywhere the shadow creatures themselves. They weren't monsters. They were refugees, families huddled together in the ruins of a dying world, their forms shifting between solid and ethereal as they tried to conserve energy. And at the center of it all, a figure that Luna somehow knew was their leader, ancient beyond measure, wise beyond understanding, and utterly exhausted by the weight of trying to save an entire species. "Balance Keeper," the figure said, its voice like wind through crystal chimes. "You have come at last. We had hoped, but hope is a luxury we can no longer afford." "I'm here to help," Luna said, her consciousness taking on a form that could interact with the Shadow Realm's reality. "We want to save your people. All of them." "Impossible," the leader replied, but Luna could hear the desperate hope underlying its words. "Our dimension collapses even as we speak. The Devourers have consumed 70% of our reality. We have perhaps days before total annihilation. Then we work fast," Luna said with a determination that surprised even her. "We're creating a pocket dimension, a safe haven where your people can rebuild. But we need your help to power the creation process." The shadow creature leader was silent for a long moment, its form flickering with what Luna realized was intense emotion. "You would do this? Risk your own world to save ours?" "We're not risking our world," Luna said firmly. "We're saving all worlds. Because if your dimension collapses while connected to ours, the Devourers will spread everywhere. This isn't just about saving your people. It's about stopping a threat that could destroy the entire multiverse. And you believe this pocket dimension will be sufficient? That it will remain stable even after our realm dies?" Luna thought about Kieran, about the love that had brought them together despite every obstacle, about the spirits who had sacrificed themselves to protect the living, about the students and professors from dozens of academies who were working together to attempt the impossible. "I believe," she said, "that when people choose to stand together, when they're willing to sacrifice for something greater than themselves, they can accomplish miracles. And right now we need a miracle." The shadow creature leader extended what might have been a hand, and when Luna touched it, she felt the combined will of an entire species flowing through her. Their hope, their desperation, their absolute determination to see their children survive. "Then let us work this miracle together," the leader said. "And may the universe forgive us if we fail." The courtyard of Shadowmere Academy had never seen anything like the gathering that took place on the morning of the dimensional arc creation. Students and professors from 7 different magical institutions stood in carefully arranged formations, their summoned creatures creating a living mandala of power that stretched across the entire space. The air itself hummed with barely contained energy, and Luna could feel the weight of hundreds of magical auras pressing against her consciousness, like a symphony waiting for its conductor. "Final headcount," Sarah announced, consulting a list that seemed to grow longer every time Luna looked at it. Shadowmere Academy, 87 students and faculty. Celestial Academy, 53. Elemental Institute, 41. Necromantic College, 36. Crystal Tower University, 28. The Druidic Circle, 19. And the Artificers Guild, 15. 279 mages, Professor Blackwood said, his voice filled with awe. "I've never seen so much magical power gathered in one place. The energy readings are off every chart we have." Luna stood at the center of it all, trying not to think about the fact that she was about to attempt something that had only been done once before in recorded history, and that attempt had nearly torn apart the fabric of reality itself. Kieran stood beside her, his hand warm and steady in hers. his presence the only thing keeping her from completely losing her nerve. "The shadow creatures are in position," Luna reported, her consciousness still partially connected to the dying realm through the communication bridge she'd established. Their leader, they call themselves the Eternal Chorus, has gathered every surviving member of their species. They're ready to contribute their power to the creation process. "And the Devourers?" Kieran wrote on a piece of paper, his gray eyes filled with concern. Luna's expression darkened. "Still consuming their dimension, but slowly. The shadow creatures have been feeding them false energy signatures, leading them away from the populated areas. We have maybe 6 hours before they realize they've been deceived and turn their attention to the real population centers." "Then we'd better get started," Professor Blackwood said, activating the massive summoning circle that had been carved into the Academy's courtyard. The symbols began to glow with silver light, and Luna felt the combined power of nearly 300 mages flowing toward her like a river of liquid starlight. The process of creating a pocket dimension was unlike anything Luna had ever experienced. It required her to hold the image of an entire world in her mind. Not just its physical structure, but its laws of physics, its magical properties, its capacity to sustain life. She had to envision forests and mountains, oceans and skies, all existing in a space that was technically no larger than a soap bubble, but functionally infinite. "Dimensional framework stabilizing," one of the Celestial Academy professors called out, monitoring the process through a complex array of magical instruments. "Reality anchors holding steady. Energy flow is, my God, it's beautiful." Luna could feel it too, the moment when possibility became reality, when the collective will of hundreds of mages reached critical mass and began to reshape the fundamental structure of existence. The pocket dimension bloomed into being like a flower made of crystallized space-time, its boundaries flexible enough to accommodate the shadow creature's unique physiology, while remaining stable enough to exist independently of any larger realm. "Shadow creature evacuation beginning," Sarah announced, her voice tight with concentration as she helped coordinate the massive teleportation effort. "First wave, families with children. Second wave, the elderly and injured. Third wave, essential personnel and cultural artifacts." Luna watched through her dimensional awareness as thousands of shadow creatures began flowing into their new home, their forms adapting to the pocket dimension's reality, with the fluid grace of beings who existed across multiple planes simultaneously. Children who looked like living starlight played in gardens of crystallized music, while their parents began the work of rebuilding their civilization in a space that was both alien and welcoming. "Energy levels holding steady," Kieran wrote on his notepad, his own depleted magical reserves somehow still contributing to the stabilization process. "But we're burning through our reserves faster than expected. At this rate, we'll be completely drained in 4 hours. "The Shadow Realm collapse is accelerating," Luna said, her consciousness touching the edges of the dying dimension. "The Devourers have realized what we're doing. They're moving toward the populated areas, trying to consume as much as possible before the evacuation is complete." "How much time do we have?" Professor Blackwood asked. Luna reached deeper into the Shadow Realm, her awareness brushing against something so alien and hungry that it made her soul recoil in horror. The Devourers weren't just destroying the shadow creature's dimension, they were unmaking it, erasing it from existence so completely that soon there would be no evidence it had ever existed at all. 2 hours, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe less. The courtyard fell silent except for the hum of magical energy and the distant sound of dimensional barriers straining under impossible pressure. 2 hours to evacuate an entire species. 2 hours to complete a process that should have taken days. 2 hours to save not just the shadow creatures, but potentially the entire multiverse. Then we work faster, Kieran wrote, his gray eyes blazing with determination. Everyone, increase power output to maximum sustainable levels. We're not losing anyone today. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every mage in the courtyard pushed their abilities to the absolute limit, their combined power flowing into Luna like a torrent of liquid fire. She felt her consciousness expanding, her awareness stretching across dimensions as she guided the evacuation with increasingly desperate efficiency. But even as the shadow creatures poured into their new home, even as the pocket dimension grew more stable and self-sustaining, Luna could feel something else building in the dying realm. The Devourers had found the evacuation point and they were coming. And when they arrived, Luna realized with growing horror, They wouldn't just consume the remaining shadow creatures. They would follow the dimensional bridge back to her world, bringing their hunger for non-existence to every realm connected to the magical network. The first sign that something had gone catastrophically wrong was the way reality started to fray at the edges. Luna felt it through her connection to the shadow realm, a wrongness so profound that it made her stomach turn and her vision blur. The Devourers had found the evacuation point, and they were doing something to the dimensional bridge that defied every law of magic she understood. "Luna," Kieran's voice cut through her growing panic. Somehow, impossibly, he was speaking again, though his voice was barely a whisper. "Your vital signs are spiking. What's happening?" "They're here," Luna gasped, her consciousness reeling as she tried to process what she was seeing through her dimensional awareness. "The Devourers. They're not just consuming the shadow realm anymore. They're trying to follow our evacuation route back to our dimension." The assembled mages looked around nervously as the air itself began to shimmer with wrongness. Several of the weaker summoned creatures whimpered and pressed closer to their masters, their instincts screaming warnings about a threat they couldn't comprehend. "Can you seal the bridge?" Professor Blackwood asked, his face pale as he monitored the dimensional readings. "Cut off their access route? Not without trapping the remaining shadow creatures," Luna replied, her mind racing through possibilities. "There are still thousands of them waiting for evacuation. If I seal the bridge now, they'll be left to face the Devourers alone. And if you don't seal it, those things will have a direct path to our world," Sarah pointed out grimly. "Luna, we might have to make a choice here." "No." Luna's voice carried a note of absolute authority that made everyone in the courtyard stop what they were doing and look at her. "We don't abandon people. We don't sacrifice the few to save the many. We find another way." "What other way?" another student asked desperately. "Luna, I can feel them through the dimensional bridge. They're like holes in existence. They don't just destroy things, they make it so those things never existed in the first place. If they reach our world..." Luna closed her eyes, her consciousness diving deeper into the dimensional bridge than she'd ever gone before. She could see them now. The Devourers. They weren't creatures in any sense she understood. They were absences, voids in the shape of hunger, spaces where reality had simply given up and stopped existing, and they were moving toward her world, with the inexorable patience of entropy itself. But there was something else, something she'd missed in her earlier observations. The Devourers weren't just randomly consuming everything in their path. They were following specific energy signatures, drawn to sources of magical power like moths to a flame. And the strongest magical signature in the entire dimensional network was me, Luna whispered, her eyes snapping open. "They're following me. My power as a balance keeper, the way I exist partially in multiple dimensions, I'm like a beacon to them." "Then we need to get you as far away from here as possible," Kieran said immediately, his voice growing stronger as his determination overrode the damage from the shadow essence. "If you're what they're tracking..." "No," Luna interrupted, a plan forming in her mind that was either brilliant or completely insane. "If I'm what they want, then I give them what they want. But not here. Not in our dimension or the shadow realm or the pocket dimension we've created." "Luna, what are you thinking?" Professor Blackwood asked, though from his expression, he was afraid he already knew. "I'm thinking," Luna said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was proposing, "that someone needs to lead them away from everything we're trying to protect. Someone needs to take them somewhere they can't hurt anyone else." "The dimensional void," Kieran breathed, his face going white. "You want to lead them into the space between dimensions? Luna, that's suicide. Nothing can survive in the void. Not even balance keepers." "Maybe," Luna admitted. "But if I can get them far enough away from inhabited dimensions, if I can trap them in a space where there's nothing for them to consume, they'll consume you instead," Kieran finished. "And then they'll find their way back to populated space anyway." "Luna, this plan is insane." "All the best plans are," Luna said with a smile that didn't quite hide her terror. "Besides, I won't be going alone." She gestured to Phantom, who had been growing more solid and substantial throughout the evacuation process. The spirit wolf's form was now shot through with threads of silver and gold, and Luna realized that her bond with Kieran had somehow transformed her familiar into something new, a creature that existed simultaneously in the realm of the living and the realm of the dead. "Phantom can anchor me to the living world," Luna explained, "and through him, You can anchor me to our dimension. I won't be lost in the void because I'll have a connection to home. And what happens when the Devourers realize they've been led into a trap? Sarah asked. What happens when they turn their attention to the anchor points? Luna was quiet for a moment, her consciousness touching the edges of the approaching wrongness. Then we hope that love is stronger than entropy, she said finally. And we pray that the bonds between us are strong enough to survive contact with things that unmake existence itself. The courtyard fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications of what she was proposing. It was a plan that required her to voluntarily enter the most dangerous space in existence, to face creatures that could erase her from reality so completely that no one would even remember she had ever lived. And yet, looking around at the faces of the people she'd come to care about, Luna knew it was the only choice that made sense. There has to be another way, Kieran said, his voice rough with emotion. Luna, I just got you back. I can't lose you again. You won't lose me, Luna said, taking his hands in hers. Because I'm not going anywhere without a way home. And you're my way home, Kieran. You always have been. Before anyone could protest further, the dimensional bridge began to pulse with malevolent energy. Through her connection to the shadow realm, Luna could feel the Devourers getting closer, their hunger growing stronger as they sensed the magical energy flowing through the evacuation route. Decision time, Professor Blackwood announced grimly. The dimensional readings are spiking. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now. Luna looked around the courtyard one last time, memorizing the faces of everyone who had risked everything to help save the shadow creatures. Students barely older than herself, professors who had dedicated their lives to protecting others, creatures who had chosen to stand with their summoners even in the face of impossible odds. This was what she was fighting for. Not just their lives, but their right to exist, to love, to choose their own destinies. Sarah, take command of the evacuation, Luna said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had learned to make impossible decisions. Get every remaining shadow creature into the pocket dimension and seal it off from the main dimensional network. Professor Blackwood, coordinate with the other academies. If this goes wrong, they need to be ready to defend their own realms. And me? Kieran asked, though Luna could see in his eyes that he already knew the answer. You're coming with me, Luna said simply. Not into the void, I won't risk you like that. But you're going to anchor me to this dimension. Keep me connected to everything I'm fighting to protect. Can you do that? Kieran's smile was fierce and proud and absolutely terrified. Try and stop me. Luna nodded, then turned to address the assembled mages. Everyone else maintain the pocket dimension's stability. No matter what happens to me, no matter what you see or feel through the dimensional bridge, don't let that safe haven collapse. The shadow creatures are counting on us. She closed her eyes and reached out with her consciousness, feeling for the dimensional bridge that connected their world to the dying shadow realm. The Devourers were almost at the evacuation point now, their wrongness so intense that it made her soul ache just to perceive them. But beyond them, she could sense something else. The last group of shadow creatures huddled together in the ruins of their world, waiting for rescue that might never come. I'm going to create a new bridge, Luna announced, her power beginning to build around her like a storm of silver and gold light. A direct route from the shadow realm to the dimensional void. The Devourers will follow my energy signature, and I'll lead them as far away from inhabited space as possible. Luna, Kieran said urgently, the void isn't empty. There are things in there, ancient things that were banished from reality for good reason. If you encounter them, then I'll deal with them when I have to, Luna interrupted. Right now, the Devourers are the immediate threat. Everything else is a problem for future Luna to solve. She felt Kieran's power flowing into hers, their magical essences intertwining in the complex harmony they discovered during their first battle together. With his strength supporting her, Luna reached across dimensions and began to tear a hole in the fabric of reality itself. The dimensional bridge that formed was unlike anything she'd created before. Instead of the stable, controlled portal she'd used for the evacuation, this was a raw wound in space-time, a screaming tear that led directly into the howling emptiness between worlds. The moment it opened, Luna felt the Devourer's attention snap toward her like a compass needle finding magnetic north. They're coming, she said, her voice barely audible over the sound of reality tearing. Everyone hold position. No matter what happens next, don't follow me into the void. And with that, Luna Ashworth stepped through the dimensional bridge, and into the space between worlds, with only her spirit wolf and her love for a fallen angel to guide her home. Behind her, the Devourers followed, their hunger for non-existence finally finding a target worthy of their attention. The dimensional void was nothing like Luna had imagined. She'd expected darkness, emptiness, the absence of everything that made existence meaningful. Instead, she found herself in a place of impossible geometries and shifting realities, where up and down were matters of opinion and the laws of physics seemed to change based on the observer's expectations. Phantom materialized beside her, his spirit form more solid here than it had ever been in the mortal realm. In this space between worlds, the boundary between life and death was meaningless, and Luna could feel the presence of every spirit that had ever been lost in the void. Explorers who had ventured too far from reality, mages who had attempted dimensional magic beyond their abilities, and things that had never been alive in any sense she understood. "Stay close," Luna whispered to her familiar, though in the void whispers carried across infinite distances, while shouts might not travel beyond arm's reach. "And whatever happens, don't let go of our connection to Kieran. He's our anchor to the living world." Through her bond with Kieran, Luna could feel his presence like a warm light in the cosmic darkness. He was still in the academy courtyard, still channeling power to maintain their connection, still serving as her lifeline to everything she was fighting to protect. The knowledge that he was there, waiting for her, gave her the strength to face what was coming. The Devourers arrived like a plague of unbeing, their forms visible only as absences in the void's chaotic landscape. Where they passed, even the impossible geometries of the space between worlds began to unravel, leaving behind regions of such complete nothingness that Luna's mind refused to acknowledge they existed. "So," Luna said, her voice carrying across the void with supernatural clarity, "you're the things that have been terrorizing entire dimensions. You're smaller than I expected." The response came not as words but as a direct assault on her consciousness, a wave of pure negation that tried to convince her she had never existed, that her thoughts and memories and very sense of self were illusions that needed to be corrected. For a moment, Luna felt herself beginning to fade, her connection to reality growing thin as the Devourer's influence washed over her. Then Phantom howled, a sound that carried the voices of every spirit that had ever loved someone enough to die for them. And Luna remembered who she was. She was Luna Ashworth, balance keeper and bridge between worlds, daughter of heroes and student of impossible magic. She was loved and she loved in return, and that made her real in ways that transcended physical existence. "Nice try," Luna said, her form solidifying as she drew power from her connection to Kieran and the assembled mages. "But I've got news for you, I'm not going anywhere." The battle that followed was unlike anything that had ever taken place in the dimensional void. Luna fought not with magic in any traditional sense, but with the fundamental force of existence itself. Every spell she cast was an affirmation of reality, every gesture a declaration that things could be rather than simply not be. The Devourers responded with waves of entropy and negation, trying to unmake not just Luna, but the very concept of Luna, to erase her so completely that the universe would forget she had ever been possible. But for every attack they made, Luna countered with memories of Kieran's smile, of Phantom's loyalty, of the shadow creature's desperate hope for survival. "You don't understand," Luna said, as she wove shields of crystallized memory around herself. "What you're really fighting. You think existence is a mistake? That consciousness is an error that needs to be corrected? But you're wrong." She reached out through her connection to Kieran, drawing on the power of every mage in the academy courtyard, and began to weave something new in the void. Not a weapon or a shield, but a story. The story of a girl who had thought herself weak until she learned that strength came from connection. The story of a boy who had fallen from grace and found redemption in love. The story of an entire species that had faced extinction and chosen to hope instead of despair. "Existence isn't a mistake," Luna continued, her voice growing stronger as the story took shape around her. "It's a choice. Every moment, every breath, every heartbeat is a decision to be rather than not be. And as long as there are people willing to make that choice, willing to fight for the right to exist and love and dream, you'll never win." The Devourers recoiled as if burned, their forms flickering with something that might have been confusion. They had consumed countless dimensions, unmade entire realities. But they had never encountered anything like this. A being who fought not with power but with purpose, who wielded existence itself as a weapon. But Luna wasn't finished. Drawing on every lesson she'd learned about balance, about the harmony between opposing forces, she began to weave the Devourers themselves into her story, not as villains to be destroyed, but as a necessary part of the cosmic order, the force that cleared away old realities to make room for new ones, the entropy that allowed for change and growth and evolution. "You're not evil," Luna said, her understanding growing as she spoke. "You're just lost. You've forgotten that destruction without creation is meaningless, that endings without beginnings are just emptiness. But I can help you remember." And in the space between worlds, surrounded by the howling chaos of the dimensional void, Luna Ashworth began to teach the Devourers how to dream. Teaching cosmic forces of entropy how to dream was, Luna reflected, probably not covered in any standard magical curriculum. But then again, nothing about her education at Shadowmere Academy had been particularly standard. She floated in the dimensional void, surrounded by beings that existed as living absences, and tried to explain the concept of hope to creatures that had spent eons erasing it from existence. "Dreams," Luna said, her voice carrying across the impossible distances of the void, "are the seeds of reality. Every world that exists, every dimension that houses life and love and laughter, started as someone's dream of what could be." The Devourers circled her like sharks made of unbeing, their forms shifting and writhing as they tried to process concepts that were fundamentally alien to their nature. Through her connection to Kieran, Luna could feel his growing exhaustion as he maintained their dimensional anchor, but she also felt his unwavering determination to bring her home safely. "We do not dream," one of the Devourers communicated, its voice like the sound of stars going out. "We correct. We return all things to the proper state of non-existence. Dreams are errors, fantasies that lead to the chaos of being. But without chaos, there's no growth," Luna replied, weaving images from her memories into the void around them. "Without the possibility of change, of new experiences, of unexpected joy, existence becomes static, dead. And what's the point of preserving something that's already dead?" She showed them scenes from her life at the academy, students laughing together in the dining hall, the moment when she'd first summoned Phantom, the night she and Kieran had kissed under the stars. Each memory blazed with the kind of vibrant reality that the Devourers had been trying to erase. But now Luna presented them not as errors to be corrected, but as examples of existence at its most beautiful. "You've been consuming dimensions for so long that you've forgotten what you were originally trying to protect," Luna continued, her understanding deepening as she spoke. "You weren't created to destroy everything. You were created to maintain balance, to clear away realities that had become stagnant or corrupt, so that new ones could take their place." The Devourers' forms flickered with something that might have been uncertainty. "The balance was broken long ago," another one communicated. "The forces of creation became too strong, too chaotic. We were compelled to restore equilibrium. By destroying everything?" Luna shook her head. "That's not balance. That's just another form of chaos. True balance requires both creation and destruction, both order and change, both endings and beginnings." She reached out with her power, not to attack or defend, but to show them something they had never seen before. The moment of perfect harmony she'd achieved with Kieran, when their opposing magics had merged into something greater than either could accomplish alone. "This is what balance looks like," Luna said, letting them feel the interplay of light and shadow, life and death, order and chaos that defined her relationship with Kieran. Not the absence of conflict, but the harmony that emerges when opposing forces choose to work together instead of trying to destroy each other. The effect on the Devourers was immediate and profound. Their forms began to shift and change, the absolute emptiness of their being filling with something Luna had never expected to see: curiosity. For the first time in eons, they were experiencing something new, something that challenged their fundamental understanding of existence. "Show us," the first Devourer said, its voice carrying a note of desperate hunger that had nothing to do with destruction. "Show us how to dream." Luna smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with magic, and everything to do with the simple joy of teaching someone something beautiful. "Close your eyes," she said, then laughed at the absurdity of giving that instruction to beings that didn't have eyes in any conventional sense, or whatever passes for eyes in your case, and imagined something that doesn't exist yet but could. What followed was perhaps the strangest lesson in the history of education. Luna guided the devourers through the process of imagination, teaching them to envision realities that were different from what currently existed without immediately trying to erase them. She showed them how to hold multiple possibilities in their consciousness simultaneously, how to appreciate the beauty of potential without needing to make it real. "I see colors," one of the devourers said wonderingly, its form beginning to shimmer with faint traces of light. "Patterns that have no purpose except to be beautiful. Is this what you call art?" "That's exactly what it is," Luna said, her heart swelling with pride and joy. "You're creating something new, something that exists just because you imagined it into being." Through her connection to Kieran, Luna felt a surge of amazement from the academy courtyard. The dimensional readings were showing something unprecedented. The void itself was beginning to stabilize. The chaotic energies that had made it so dangerous, slowly organizing themselves into patterns of incredible complexity and beauty. The devourers, Luna realized with growing excitement, they're not just learning to dream, they're learning to create. They're becoming forces of construction instead of destruction. But even as she celebrated this breakthrough, Luna felt something else stirring in the void. Ancient presences that had been sleeping in the deepest reaches of the space between worlds, awakened by the unprecedented display of creative energy. And unlike the devourers, these beings had no interest in learning new ways of existence. They were the old ones, the entities that had been banished from reality itself for crimes against existence so profound that even the cosmic forces of entropy feared them, and they were very, very angry about being disturbed. "Luna!" Kieran's voice came through their connection, tight with alarm. "Something's coming. The dimensional readings are going crazy. Whatever you've awakened in there, it's big and it's hostile and it's heading straight for you." Luna looked around the void, seeing the shadows beginning to move with malevolent purpose, and realized that her greatest challenge was yet to come. Because teaching the devourers to dream had been the easy part. Now she had to face the nightmares. The old ones emerged from the deepest reaches of the void like living nightmares given form and purpose. Unlike the devourers, who were absences in the shape of hunger, these beings were presences so overwhelming that reality itself recoiled from their existence. They had been banished from the multiverse for good reason. They were the embodiment of every dark impulse, every cruel thought, every moment of despair that sentient beings had ever experienced. "Well," Luna said, trying to keep her voice steady as the temperature in the void dropped to absolute zero. "This is new." The largest of the old ones spoke, its voice like the sound of civilizations falling. "The little balance keeper thinks to teach our servants new tricks. How amusing. We have slept for eons, dreaming of the day we might return to the realms of existence. And now you have given us the perfect opportunity." Luna felt her blood turn to ice as she realized what was happening. By teaching the devourers to create instead of destroy, she had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the void. The old ones, who had been contained by the devourers' endless hunger for non-existence, were now free to act. "The devourers were never your enemies," Luna said, understanding flooding through her like a cold tide. "They were your prison guards. They kept you contained by constantly erasing any reality you tried to corrupt." "Clever girl," another old one hissed, its form shifting between shapes too terrible for human minds to fully comprehend. "Yes, the devourers served as our unwitting jailers, their hunger for non-existence preventing us from manifesting in any stable reality. But now, thanks to your misguided compassion, they have learned to create rather than destroy. And creation, dear child, is something we can corrupt." Luna watched in horror as tendrils of absolute malevolence began reaching toward the newly dreaming devourers, seeking to twist their first tentative creations into instruments of suffering and despair. The beautiful patterns of light and color that the former entropy beings had imagined began to darken and writhe, transforming into shapes that hurt to look at. "No," Luna said, her voice carrying across the void with supernatural force. "I won't let you corrupt them. They're learning to be something better than what they were. And what will you do to stop us?" The largest old one asked with amusement, that felt like acid on Luna's soul. You are one small girl, lost in the space between worlds, anchored to reality by nothing more than a romantic attachment to a broken angel. We are the accumulated nightmares of every sentient being that has ever lived. We are fear made manifest, despair given form, hatred crystallized into purpose. Through her connection to Kieran, Luna felt his desperate attempts to send her more power, but the dimensional bridge was straining under the weight of the Old One's presence. She could sense the Academy courtyard, where nearly 300 mages were pouring their energy into maintaining her anchor to reality. But even their combined strength felt insignificant compared to the cosmic horror she was facing. "You're right," Luna said, surprising the Old Ones with her calm acceptance. "I am just one small girl. But you know what? I've learned something important during my time at Shadowmere Academy." She reached out with her consciousness, not toward Kieran or the assembled mages, but toward the Devourers who were struggling against the Old One's corruption. "I've learned that the most powerful magic isn't about individual strength. It's about connection. It's about choosing to stand together even when everything seems hopeless. The Devourers cannot help you," an Old One sneered. "We are already corrupting their newfound creativity, turning their dreams into nightmares that will spread across every dimension they touch." "Maybe," Luna said, her voice growing stronger as she felt the Devourers responding to her call. "But here's the thing about nightmares. They only have power if you face them alone. And none of us are alone anymore." What happened next was something that had never occurred in the entire history of the dimensional void. The Devourers, instead of trying to resist the Old One's corruption individually, began to link their consciousness together, sharing their dreams and fears and hopes in a network of mutual support that transcended their individual limitations. "We choose," the first Devourer said, its voice now harmonizing with dozens of others, "to dream together, to create together, to face the darkness together." The Old Ones recoiled as if struck, their forms flickering with something that might have been fear. "Impossible. You are creatures of entropy, of isolation, of the hunger for non-existence. You cannot simply choose to be something else." "Watch us," Luna said, her own consciousness joining the network of dreaming Devourers. Through their shared awareness, she could feel Kieran's presence more strongly than ever, and beyond him, the warm glow of every mage in the Academy courtyard. But it didn't stop there. The network was expanding, reaching across dimensions to touch every being that had ever chosen hope over despair, love over hatred, creation over destruction. The shadow creatures in their pocket dimension felt the call and added their voices to the chorus. The spirits of the dead who had sacrificed themselves to protect the living joined the network, their essence flowing through Luna like streams of liquid starlight. Even the students and professors from the other academies, connected through their shared magical working, became part of something larger than themselves. "This is what you never understood," Luna said to the Old Ones, her voice now carrying the harmonized power of countless souls. "Existence isn't about individual strength or cosmic forces or the balance between creation and destruction. It's about choice. Every moment, every being in every dimension gets to choose whether to add to the sum total of love and hope in the universe, or to subtract from it." The Old One's forms began to waver as the network of connected consciousness grew stronger. "You cannot banish us," they said, but their voices carried a note of uncertainty. "We are eternal. We are the darkness that exists in every heart." "You're right," Luna admitted. "We can't banish you, because you're part of the natural order. Darkness exists, fear exists, despair exists, but so does light, and courage, and hope. And when people choose to stand together, when they choose to share their strength instead of hoarding it, the light always wins." She reached out through the network, feeling the combined will of thousands of beings who had chosen to believe in something better than themselves. "We're not going to destroy you," Luna said to the Old Ones. "We're going to do something much worse. We're going to give you a choice." And in the space between worlds, surrounded by the dreams of reformed Devourers and the love of countless souls, Luna Ashworth began to offer the Old Ones the one thing they had never expected to receive: the chance at redemption. The Old Ones recoiled from Luna's offer like vampires confronted with sunlight, their forms writhing and shifting as they tried to process a concept that was fundamentally alien to their nature. For eons, they had existed as pure malevolence, the crystallized essence of every cruel impulse and dark thought that sentient beings had ever harbored. The idea that they could choose to be something else was more terrifying to them than any weapon or spell. Redemption? The largest Old One's voice carried notes of confusion and rage. We are the accumulated nightmares of existence itself. We are the darkness that lurks in every heart, the despair that follows every loss, the hatred that grows from every injustice. We cannot simply choose to be otherwise. Can't you? Luna asked, her consciousness still linked to the vast network of souls that had chosen hope over despair. Through their shared awareness, she could feel the Old One's true nature, not the cosmic horrors they appeared to be, but the broken, twisted remnants of beings who had once been capable of love and joy and wonder. You weren't always like this, Luna continued, her understanding deepening as she touched the edges of their ancient memories. Once you were explorers, philosophers, artists. You were beings who pushed the boundaries of existence, who asked the hard questions about the nature of reality. But somewhere along the way, you lost hope. You decided that existence was fundamentally flawed, that consciousness was a mistake that needed to be corrected. The Old One's forms flickered with something that might have been recognition. We saw too much, one of them whispered, its voice carrying the weight of cosmic despair. We witnessed the birth and death of countless civilizations, watched as beings we loved were consumed by entropy and time. We learned that all things end, that all joy is temporary, that all love eventually turns to loss. And so you decided to embrace the ending, Luna said softly, to become the very forces of destruction and despair that had hurt you so deeply. But here's what you forgot. Endings aren't the only truth. For every ending, there's also a beginning. For every loss, there's also the possibility of new love. For every moment of despair, there's also the chance for hope. Through the network, Luna shared her own memories, the pain of losing her parents, the loneliness of arriving at Shadowmere Academy as an outcast, the terror of discovering her true nature as a balance keeper. But she also shared the joy of finding Kieran, the wonder of connecting with Phantom, the satisfaction of helping save the shadow creatures. Pain and joy aren't opposites, Luna explained. They're partners. You can't have one without the other, and trying to eliminate all suffering just eliminates the possibility of happiness as well. The secret isn't to avoid pain, it's to find meaning in it, to let it teach you compassion instead of cruelty. The Old Ones were silent for a long moment, their forms growing less solid as they struggled with concepts they had rejected for eons. Finally, the largest one spoke, its voice barely above a whisper. Even if what you say is true, even if redemption were possible for beings like us, the damage we have done is beyond measure. We have corrupted countless realities, turned hope into despair, love into hatred. How could such crimes ever be forgiven? The same way any crime is forgiven, Luna said simply, by choosing to do better going forward, by using your power to heal instead of harm, to create instead of destroy, to protect instead of corrupt. She gestured to the Devourers, who were still learning to dream, their newfound creativity blossoming into patterns of incredible beauty. Look at them. They spent eons erasing existence, but now they're learning to build it. If they can change, if they can choose to become something better than what they were, then so can you. And if we refuse? Another Old One asked. If we choose to remain as we are, to continue our work of corruption and despair? Luna's expression grew sad but determined. Then we'll stop you. Not by destroying you. That would just create more darkness, more pain. But by containing you, by limiting your ability to hurt others, by surrounding you with so much love and hope and joy that your influence becomes meaningless. The network of connected souls pulsed with agreement, their combined will creating a barrier of pure positive emotion that made the Old Ones flinch. It wasn't a prison. It was an invitation, a constant reminder that there was another way to exist. Choose, Luna said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had learned to make impossible decisions. Choose to remain as you are, trapped in your own hatred and despair, or choose to remember what you once were and could be again. Choose to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. The Old Ones looked at each other, their forms flickering with uncertainty. For the first time in eons, they were faced with a genuine choice, not between different forms of destruction, but between destruction and creation, between despair and hope, between remaining as they were and becoming something better. And in the space between worlds, Surrounded by the dreams of reformed devourers and the love of countless souls, the old ones began to remember what it felt like to hope. The first one to change was the smallest, its form of writhing darkness, slowly brightening until it resembled a star being born. "I choose," it said, its voice filled with wonder, "to remember what it felt like to create something beautiful." One by one, the others followed, their ancient hatred and despair slowly transforming into something that might, with time and effort, become wisdom and compassion. Not all of them made the choice. Some retreated deeper into the void, clinging to their darkness like a familiar blanket. But enough chose redemption that the balance of power in the space between worlds shifted permanently. "It's done," Luna said, feeling the network of souls beginning to stabilize into something permanent and beautiful. The void is no longer a place of chaos and danger. It's becoming something new, a space where broken things can be healed, where lost souls can find their way home. Through her connection to Kieran, she felt his joy and relief, and beyond him, the celebration of everyone who had contributed to this impossible victory. They had saved the shadow creatures, reformed the devourers, and offered redemption to the old ones themselves. But most importantly, they had proven that love really was stronger than entropy, that hope could triumph over despair, and that even the most broken things could be healed if enough people were willing to try. "Time to go home," Luna said to Phantom, who had remained faithfully by her side throughout the entire ordeal. "I think we've done enough universe saving for one day." The journey back through the dimensional bridge felt like swimming upstream through liquid starlight. Luna's consciousness, expanded beyond all normal limits by her connection to the network of souls, slowly contracted back to something resembling human scale. The void fell away behind her, no longer a place of chaos and terror but a realm of healing and hope, where beings who had forgotten how to dream were learning to create again. When she finally stepped back into the academy courtyard, Luna's legs gave out immediately. Only Kieran's arms, stronger than they should have been after his ordeal with the shadow essence, kept her from collapsing entirely. The assembled mages erupted in cheers that could probably be heard in the next kingdom, but Luna only had eyes for the young man holding her up. "Your voice," she said wonderingly, reaching up to touch his face. "You're speaking again." Kieran's smile was radiant, and when he spoke, his voice was rough but unmistakably his own. "Turns out that when you help save the multiverse, reality tends to give you a few rewards. The shadow essence damage, it's not completely healed, but it's healing. Slowly. And Nyx?" As if summoned by her name, the shadow phoenix materialized beside them in a burst of dark fire, her form more magnificent than ever. The shadow essence hadn't destroyed their bond. It had transformed it, deepened it, made it something that transcended the physical realm. "She never really left," Kieran explained, his hand finding Luna's and squeezing gently. "She was just waiting for the right moment to come back." Professor Blackwood approached them, his face beaming with pride and exhaustion in equal measure. "The pocket dimension is stable," he reported. "The shadow creatures are safe. The devourers have been transformed into forces of creation. And according to our readings, the dimensional void itself has become a place of healing rather than destruction." He paused, shaking his head in amazement. "Luna, what you've accomplished, it's going to change everything. The way we understand magic, the way we relate to other dimensions, the very nature of existence itself." "Good," Luna said, leaning into Kieran's warmth. "It was about time someone shook things up around here." Sarah appeared at her other side, grinning widely. "So what happens now? I mean, we've saved the multiverse, reformed cosmic forces of entropy, and turned the dimensional void into a rehabilitation center for broken souls. What do you do for an encore?" Luna looked around the courtyard at all the faces, students and professors from 7 different academies, creatures both summoned and spirit, all of them connected now by bonds forged in the crucible of impossible circumstances. They had started as strangers, brought together by crisis, but they had become something more. They had become family. "Now," Luna said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had learned to make the hard choices, "we go back to school. We learn. We grow. We prepare for whatever comes next." She smiled, and there was something in that expression that spoke of wisdom earned through trial by fire. "Because if there's one thing I've learned during my time at Shadowmere Academy, it's that there's always something coming next." And we'll face it together, Kieran added, his golden eyes, fully restored now, blazing with inner light, meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart skip. Whatever comes, we face it together. Together, Luna agreed, and the words seemed to echo across dimensions, carrying with it the promise of a future built on connection rather than isolation, on hope rather than despair, on love rather than fear. 6 months later, Luna stood in the memorial garden where she and Kieran had shared their first kiss, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The academy had changed in the wake of their victory. Thorn had been removed from power, replaced by a council that included Professor Blackwood and representatives from all the allied academies. The curriculum had been reformed to emphasize cooperation over competition, understanding over domination. But the most significant change was harder to quantify. There was a sense of connection now, a network of relationships that spanned dimensions and species. The shadow creatures in their pocket dimension had become allies and teachers, sharing their knowledge of multidimensional existence. The reformed devourers had become guardians of the void, helping lost souls find their way home. Even some of the redeemed old ones had begun to contribute, their ancient wisdom tempered by newfound compassion. "Penny for your thoughts?" Kieran's voice came from behind her, warm and familiar, and perfectly, wonderfully alive. Luna turned to find him approaching with Phantom and Nyx at his side, the Spirit Wolf and Shadow Phoenix moving in perfect harmony. The bond between all four of them had grown stronger over the months, a connection that transcended the physical and touched something eternal. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Luna said, settling onto their favorite bench. 6 months ago, I was the weakest student at the most dangerous academy in the world. Now you're the girl who taught cosmic forces of entropy how to dream," Kieran finished, sitting beside her and taking her hand in his. "The balance keeper who proved that love really is stronger than entropy itself." "We proved it," Luna corrected. "All of us together. That's what made the difference. Not individual power, but collective will. Not isolation, but connection." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Each point of light represented a world, a dimension, a reality where beings were choosing every moment whether to add to the sum total of love and hope in the universe, or to subtract from it. "So what's next?" Kieran asked eventually. "We've saved the multiverse, reformed the academy, and turned the dimensional void into a cosmic rehabilitation center. What do we do for an encore?" Luna smiled, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight. "We live," she said simply. "We love. We learn. We help others discover that they're stronger than they think, that connection is more powerful than isolation, that hope can triumph over despair if enough people are willing to believe in it. And if something threatens the multiverse again, then we'll face it," Luna said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had stared into the abyss and taught it how to sing. "Together. Because that's what people do when they love something enough to fight for it." Kieran leaned over and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, silver and gold light danced around them like captured starlight, a visible manifestation of the harmony they had achieved between opposing forces. "I love you, Luna Ashworth," Kieran said, his golden eyes blazing with inner fire. "I love you too, Kieran Shadowmere," Luna replied. "And I love this crazy, dangerous, beautiful world we've helped create." Above them, the stars shone down on a universe that was a little brighter, a little more hopeful, a little more connected than it had been before, and in the dimensional void, beings who had forgotten how to dream were learning to create wonders that would have been impossible to imagine. Because sometimes when the world is ending and all hope seems lost, the only rational response is to attempt the impossible. And sometimes, just sometimes, love really is the most powerful magic of all. Luna Ashworth had arrived at Shadowmere Academy as the weakest student in the school. She left as the girl who reminded the universe why balance keepers were feared throughout the magical world. Not because of their power to destroy, but because of their power to transform even the darkest forces into something beautiful. In the end, she had learned the most important lesson of all, that existence isn't about individual strength or cosmic forces, or the balance between creation and destruction. It's about choice. Every moment, every being in every dimension gets to choose whether to add to the sum total of love and hope in the universe, or to subtract from it. And when people choose to stand together, when they choose to share their strength instead of hoarding it, the light always wins.